Aloha. Well, I am under my VW, and it definitely needs a cleaning, that's for sure. I'm gonna check a few things under here. I've been trying to troubleshoot my engine just shutting off while I'm driving it, and as of right now, I've changed all the spark plug wires. I've cleaned up the engine, changed the air filter, modified the air box. I mean, I've cleaned everything, redid grounds, cleaned connections, replaced wires. A lot of the old stuff came out. And honestly, this VW it's driven and run the absolute best it ever has, ever since I've had it for the last 3 years. And it's always actually run pretty good, but now it runs even better. Throttle response is better, everything's better. And mind you, everything is completely stock. I haven't changed anything other than just buying new wires and what have you. So it ran awesome. I went driving it on the freeway, runs wonderfully, and then it just shuts off. And it's just the engine. It sounds like ignition running. The lights stay on, everything stays on. I was thinking it was a short, so I was checking all the wiring, and as of right now it still seems good. So what I'm trying today is, I was going to go under, or I'm actually under my VW right now. That's my fuel line. I purposely put clear line on there during a road trip so I could just see if there was fuel running from the fuel tank to the fuel filter to the fuel pump, and then I actually had clear line back here to make sure there was fuel coming out of the fuel pump during this entire road trip, and there was. So that's the reasoning why I've got clear lines on here. I actually didn't even know there was clear lines available, so it does help as far as visually being able to see if fuel is running. And right now what I notice is when I turn the car on, it's running great. It idles great. I came under the VW to see if when the vehicle does shut off, if it does it because the fuel pump loses power. So I came down here, I had a voltmeter on the fuel pump. I was getting 12 volts with the engine running. When the engine shuts off, there's no 12 volts here. So I don't know if that's normal. When you turn the ignition on, I would assume this fuel pump should come on and run. From what I read, it should read 12 volts. There's 12, power ground at the start at the fuel pump. But when the engine is off, there's 0 power here. So I'm not sure if that's normal or not. So if you know if that's normal or not, definitely let me know. I'm going to do a little research as well and find out for myself, so I hear it from the horse's mouth and not the horse's other end. But it doesn't read 12 volts when the engine is off. So like I said, I would assume that as soon as you turn the ignition on, the fuel pump should be running, and there should be at least 12 volts there. So that's one thing. The other thing is, while I was down here waiting, I wanted to see if at some point when it was running, if the fuel pump would lose power before the engine shut off, or would the engine shut off first before the fuel pump shuts off. So while I was doing that, what I noticed, and I would have probably never noticed it if I had solid black fuel line, but with this clear line, I noticed that between the fuel filter, between this and the fuel pump, right in between here, there's a bunch of air bubbles, and then I could actually hear air seeping in from somewhere, but a whole bunch of air bubbles in here. And as it started to build up here, a bigger bubble appeared here, went into the fuel pump, and then the engine started to sputter. And I mean, if you look real close, you might actually be able to see a small air bubble in there, because I just moved all the air back into the fuel filter. I'm pretty sure that's not normal, but there was no air coming out between the fuel tank and the fuel filter. But between the outline of the fuel filter and the in of the fuel pump, there's a bunch of bubbles. But I did notice that there was bubbles in the fuel filter as well, and I could hear air. So I'm squeezing the fuel filter. I'm actually trying to see if any fuel, if any fuel leaks out of it. If there's a hole, I would assume some gas leaks out of it. Albeit if it's a tiny one, air's going in and the gas coming out would probably evaporate, but I at least would smell it. I smell no fuel. I don't see any fuel drips. I don't see anything that would suggest that fuel is leaking anywhere. But again, when it's on, the fuel pump is running, I see air bubbles coming from the fuel filter going into the fuel pump, and I hear the engine sputtering. So I am hoping that that is the problem that I've been having. Maybe it's an air buildup that makes the vehicle stall out. I wait a little bit, I start it back up, and it runs great. And then it may or may not shut off again. So, but like I said, while I was trying to find out about voltage to the fuel pump, I noticed and heard air and air bubbles in the fuel filter. So kind of accidentally found what I hope is the problem. So I'm going to change a little bit of this fuel line. I'm going to change the fuel filter, and I'm going to reclamp everything, and we'll see what happens. So for those of you having that issue, because there were a few online saying everything runs great and then the vehicle shuts off. I've seen all these things on computers and checking things, checking mass airflow sensors, and all that is great. And a lot of times people do that, replace those sensors, and it runs great for maybe a day, maybe a week, and it all starts up again. So who knows, it might be because you have solid black fuel lines, solid fuel filters, maybe you never notice that air is leaking in somewhere in the fuel line, which affects the fuel pump and everything else. So I'm going to first change the fuel line and the fuel filter, tighten all the connections, and see if it's an air leak that was causing the problem in the fuel line. If it's not that, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run power directly from the battery into this fuel pump, and then start it and see if that keeps the vehicle on. Because I said, when I turn the ignition on, there is no power to this fuel pump. But when I start it, when I try to start it and it actually starts, there is power there. And while it's running, there's power there. So, but when the engine shuts off, there's no longer 12 volts at the fuel pump. So like I said, I'm not sure if that's normal or not, but we'll find out. We'll find out if it makes a difference running direct power to the fuel pump, and just keeping it on all the time fixes that issue. But I just want to enjoy my VW, get it on the road. While it is fun to tinker with this thing, it's even more fun to go drive it around, go camp out, watch the sunset, barbecue, and simply enjoy. And everybody around me is happy too. It seems to put smiles on anyone's face who manages to see this 82 VW Vanagon on the road. So it's one of the magical things about having one of these, is you enjoy it, your friends and family enjoy it, and everybody around you enjoys it when it goes driving by. And when it's parked and the top is popped open, I should charge for admission just to come see it, because it's a definite attraction and people are definitely attracted to it. It's such a wonderful, neat little vehicle. And I have a few vehicles to play with, but I would say this is the absolute most enjoyable of them all. So you guys sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride, and enjoy this journey with me into troubleshooting what's wrong with this VW. And I think we'll get to the bottom of it here very shortly, and hopefully this helps you with yours as well. You guys take care. Aloha.